Hi, welcome to Wisdom and Beyond. I'm Teena Cahill, and today we have a great guest, Kathy Marolda, the owner of the Cranberry Station Galleries on Palmer Square, right?
Yes.
And the past president of the Borough of Merchants for Princeton.
Yes.
And we're here today to talk a little bit about the holidays are coming, time to go shopping, and what it's like to be a small business owner in today's economy. Besides having the gallery, you are one incredible artist, girl.
Oh, thank
Your
you.
watercolors, your oils, all this artwork that I see in your gallery is absolutely wonderful. I love your work.
Oh,
You're
well,
an
thank
incredible
you.
talent. But you're also a businesswoman.
Yes.
So how long have you been in business?
26 years.
That's pretty good. You know, most small businesses, what is it, 80% fail in the first 5 years,
Yes.
and 5 years later, 80% of those have failed. So I would say you've got a pretty good track record
Yes.
here. So tell me how you see business today for small businesses in the central New Jersey area, and specifically in Princeton.
Well, I believe small businesses, owning a small business has always been a challenge.
Right.
I think it's particularly challenging now, but I saw that challenge coming really strong about 10 years ago.
Okay, and how did you see that? What did you know that helped you see what was happening?
In my particular case, and for many of us in the small business, I think the popularity of the internet
Yes.
was very hurtful.
Sure.
Imports coming
Yes.
over from overseas. I
Right.
used to do a lot of corporate work. Suddenly, it became much more convenient and easier for people to just click onto
Right.
the internet and order this frame,
Right.
that mat,
And
that
that's the
mat.
problem all over today. It's easier to order your books on the internet, your clothes on the internet, your artwork on the internet. Well, I don't know that I would actually buy artwork on the
Well,
internet.
the good news is that in the last year, it's been actually turning around again, especially in the art community, because people started to realize that every office had the same art.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the frames were not really wood, and they look like wood, but it might be polystyrene, and they're starting to warp.
Right,
So,
sure.
so those of us who have sweated it out during
Yeah.
this time, we're starting to see the benefits of the one-to-one relationship again, with actually going in with corner samples and showing
But
people.
it's tough to be a small business person. It's always tough,
very,
right?
It's difficult. It's very
Yeah.
difficult, but not impossible.
Exactly. So what's right about it? That's a good way to...
Well, I think that when you can understand the importance of relationships, I know we
Yes.
spoke a little bit about that, and I just think that that is the most important key to being successful in the long run, is that you're not in it for to make your killing this year.
That's right.
A lot of people, I'm sorry to say, come in thinking, oh, they're going to open up a store here in Princeton, and everyone's going to flood right in.
Right.
And it's not that way. People do business with people they know. It's as
It's
simple
absolutely
as
true.
that.
And it's an axiom for all businesses. It just happens at
Right.
different levels. It's really about networking. It's about relationships. And implied in the word of relationships is the fact that we actually care about people.
Right.
That
Because
we-
the next part of that is that people do business with people they know, and then
Right.
more recently we seem to be adding on, and trust.
Right.
You just can't show up for a couple of meetings and say, hand out cards.
Exactly.
You have to be in it for the long run.
In the long run. So you come in and you know it's about building this network, about really what I call the wider our webs of connectedness, the higher we bounce
Right.
in all parts of our
Absolutely.
life, not just in business, but in all parts of our life. And so, and it's sort of that old-fashioned idea, if you want to call it old-fashioned, that we're dedicated to serving our customers. And I think that when you own your business, you're so much closer to the bottom line, and also you can develop these deeper relationships with people that sometimes if it's a big conglomerate, now that's not always the case, but sometimes when people just come in and work a few hours here and a few hours there, they don't have that same sense of feeling of connecting. That's not always true, because there are wonderful salespeople and managers that work for some of the big chains. I don't mean that's true across the board, but I think in a small business, you get there sooner. You have that awareness sooner.
I agree. And Tina, you're so right about that web of connection, because it may not even be a business. I may go to a local Chamber of Commerce meeting or a borough merchant meeting and not speak at all to someone about my business, but maybe we're talking about another experience, woman to woman,
Right.
As in
right.
the situation. And there's just that bond. You make a small web,
That's right.
a group of friends, and the business comes from somewhere else.
That's right.
Down the line. But I've gotten to know you personally and know that you're a person I want to see succeed. And
Right.
that's what seems to happen.
And isn't that the best part? To be able to have all these friends that are in businesses, that are doing different kinds of things, and to know that you can have a small part in their success. And I'm
Right.
sure they feel the same way. I mean, isn't that the best life?
I found that most people do. I mean,
I think
people
so,
want
too.
to see other people
I
succeed.
agree. I agree.
And that's where they're, and that's what I think the unique thing about doing business in this community, what's so nice about it, and I know it's true for us over on Palmer Square and in that little neighborhood, the whole downtown. It's not good news for us to hear that someone else, there's the competition
someone failed.
went out.
Yeah.
You want everyone to succeed,
Exactly.
and you help each other that
And
way.
I want you to succeed too, because I have an office downtown, and I like to walk over to your gallery, by the way. In fact, I came over there, you weren't there, I think you were on vacation or something, to buy a gift for my girlfriend, and the woman that worked for you was fantastic.
Oh, good.
I sort of told her what I wanted, and she started looking at all these different pieces with me, and it was just a wonderful experience.
good
And then
to
I
hear.
went next door and had some soup, you know,
Good.
so there you go, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
So as a woman in business, let's talk about that for a second. Let's see. There was a book that came out a few years ago called What Women Really Want. And it was a poll-driven book that these two women put together trying to figure out what women want. And one of the things they talked about was something called generational compression, that regardless of age, women all want the same thing. Do you know what it is?
Friendship?
Time.
Time.
More
Oh,
time,
that's-
right?
yes.
And we have women now in the workplace into their 7th,
Yeah.
8th, 9th decade, you know.
that's
So
true.
we have lots of women. And I know a lot of women left corporate America or left kinds of jobs where they thought that they couldn't gain control of their time. So that according to the book, What Women Really Want, at that time it was written, women owned 1/3 of the businesses in this country, and of the small businesses, and co-owned 50%. And we know that many of these fail very quickly, and there's no safety net under you. But so everybody thought it was so great that small businesses were the largest growing sector of the economy. But for a few years, I've been saying, yeah, well, what's going to happen when things get tough? And that's what's happening, right? So what's your experience as a woman? How do you think there's any difference in being a woman small business owner as opposed to being a guy? I don't know if there is at all. But
I don't feel that anymore. Now,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's because, you know, I've been around a while.
Right, good for you.
But I have to say, when I first, we're going back 26 years, and
Yeah.
it was hard for, and one of my very first accounts, good account, was Carter Wallace. And back then, they were the Heritage Banks, and there were Mid-Atlantic Heritage, BNC. And that was difficult for me. When I went in those early years, people, and especially if I said I was an artist, I didn't even tell anyone
Right.
that I was.
That was probably a
an
good
artist,
idea. Yeah.
because it was, oh, she's got a cute little hobby.
Right.
To
Exactly.
keep herself
Right.
out of trouble,
Right.
you know. And it was almost, and I started this business with, I have 4 children, and I was a stay-at-home mom in the beginning, because that's what I really wanted to do. And even that was something that I didn't like to tell people. Now it's kind of hip to be home
Now it's
again.
okay to
but
do
back
that,
then
right?
it was like I didn't want people
you didn't
to
feel
know.
as if you were valid.
Right.
Yeah.
And you really had to
Which is
prove
sad,
yourself.
but you know.
But then, in a way, it was survival of the fittest, because
Right.
what I tried to do was zero in on groups that I was comfortable with. I joined the New Jersey Association of Women Business Owners.
Sure, good.
That was a very comfortable group of women to sit with and talk about these problems
Right.
with. And I did see, as time went on, the younger women coming up, and I'm not saying that we paved the way, but it didn't seem as difficult for them. I don't have any problem. I don't personally seem to have any problems going in anymore of being a woman.
Well, I think that, first of all, you did pave the way. And secondly, the culture has changed because people like you paved the way.
Okay.
And part of what I say to women all the time is that I think that every man and woman, it doesn't matter, we have to be the CEO of our own life. And we have to make choices about how we're going to respond to different kinds of events. And we have to make a choice about driving our vision forward, right? But I think that what's changed is that we now are more likely to look at this sort of being the CEO of our own life and being a leader at home as well as at work. These are transferable skills. So it used to be if you stayed home, I guess somehow that was demeaning of you, which it, of course is not.
Right.
What's a more valuable leadership position than being a mother, right? and then somehow if you went to work, then you were a leader. And so now I think the culture has evolved, that people understand that the home requires great leadership, being a mother requires great leadership, but it's the same kind of skills that you use when you go to work.
And this
Networking. Who doesn't network as a mother? I mean, how many carpools do you need to have when you got 4 kids?
That's right. And this isn't to. I like men. I'm not bashing men.
I like men.
But
I've married 2, not at the same time. Okay.
I have a wonderful husband and 3 sons, and but women know how to multitask. It's just we know how to do it. I have women. I've always had women working with me in the gallery. I have one incredible woman who's been with me for at least 12 years.
That's great.
Who has a 36-year-old autistic son. I have another woman who's been with me about 10 years who's a single African-American woman with his daughter. And we always have at least 1 or 2 college students, and they're usually girls, women. And we nurture them, and then they go on, and they come back for a while on the holidays to work, and it's wonderful.
It's great.
But the whole idea of that, and we've all been together, and before that, I had the women that I had there before that were also at least 12 years. So I've not had a big turnover. But we all know that if Anne, whose son is autistic, needs to get out of there because she got a phone call, we cover.
You cover.
If Lori gets a phone call because her daughter's sick at school, she's out of there.
Right.
So and no one says, oh, she did it again. You know, it's just, I'm not saying that men might not be able to handle that, but we can go from being very professional and maybe, like you said, waiting on you and coming in, to saying, oh my God, I've got to get to the nurse's office.
You know, I think corporate America is changing a little bit because it had to.
Yeah.
You look at companies like, I think Best Buy is one of the companies that in some of their executive departments, they've allowed people to go to work whenever they want to, from wherever they want to, whenever, you know, however they want to do it, as long as they get their job done. And they found that, you know, their retention rate went up way higher and the productivity was excellent and all this stuff. So I don't know that we can break these things down so much between men and women like we used to, because in reality, I think men and women are, like, I think when I see people out there sort of 40, 45 and under, I think there are very few gender differences between the men and women, whereas in my age group, there were more traditional gender differences, you know. But I want to talk to you a little bit about multitasking, okay? Because I have a mixed feeling about that. I know that women take great pride in multitasking, and I'm probably the queen of multitasking, although I do it a little bit differently. You know, men and women are more alike than they're different. But there's some possibility that because of some of our brain anatomy that women may have sort of more access to both sides of the brain, but only some women, and it's not across the board. And, you know, I'm not even sure if that's true, but scholars have looked at that kind of stuff, right? But for whatever the reasons, maybe it's just evolutionary that we had to rear the kids, so we had to watch for those saber-toothed tigers and scan, right? Women can walk in a room and call their mother, plan a golf game, write a report, pay some bills, you know, do whatever, make macaroni and cheese, right? Well, I think our brain was set up for us to be able to do that when we were sort of early people, when the women had to come together. You know, our number one job is to survive. So the women had to come together, they had to rear the children. So we had to be careful because the guys were off like hunting elephants or whatever the guys were doing, right? Probably the women were doing it too, but the women that were left in the village. So we learned to do that. But I don't think nature expected us to get to this internet age where we're doing all these kinds of things. We have all these tasks going. And so even though we're all very proud of the fact that we can fill every minute of every day, which is not a good thing, doing some task, I know some of the research coming out of the University of Pennsylvania with Martin Seligman and stuff like that is he talks about that women aren't really so happy when they do that, because what we really need is closure. And he talks about taking the long cut. And then I read an article that they did some research someplace by looking at those PET scans of the brain or whatever, and they thought that it looked like the brain was didn't like it when we were like jumping from task to task. So I'm all for multitasking if we say it this way. Have several tasks you want to get done, and maybe you're not going to get a whole task done from the first one, but define how much you want to get done and get some closure and do that. Actually get that done before you move on to the next thing. Because when we're scattered like this, then it's really hard to, I think, to focus. And so I'm okay with multitasking as long as we get some closure on part of a task as we go along. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree with you. And luckily, before any of this was, I guess, in vogue,
Talked about.
I always had my little Franklin organizer.
Yes.
And I had to, because I had to do that.
That's right.
I swore I was never going to have email.
Yes.
So, you know,
It's
to
a
me
big
that
time
was an
waster.
intrusion.
It's a huge time waster.
But I do.
But you need to make appointments to check your email.
Right.
Don't keep it on all the time. Don't run every second and check it. It's a huge time waster.
But I don't, I never say never, but I certainly hope I don't ever get a BlackBerry or whatever.
I just got one.
Oh, okay.
My granddaughter took me out.
I
I got
know.
it. But I have to tell you, I was just in California last week, so it's 3-hour time change. I'm up early. My husband was with me. And I just pulled out my BlackBerry and looked at some email. That was an okay time to do it, and then I didn't have to worry about it the rest of the day.
Now,
So, I
know,
see some of the advantages
I'm
now.
sure there are. I just, you know, I'm very fortunate where my store is on Palmer Square there because I have the windows of the
That's
world
right.
there.
You can see everything.
And I see.
You don't need a BlackBerry.
No one. Everyone walks by and they're.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, my
they're all
goodness.
looking at
no
their BlackBerries.
one's looking at each other, and
Oh,
no one.
interesting.
And that bothers me.
Oh, that's interesting.
And no one's. Well, I shouldn't say all the time, but a lot of the time, I always try to see who's saying hello to who. Just
Yeah.
people walking on the
Oh, yeah.
They check their messages. They're on the
Well, we are
phone.
social beings, and we need to
And-
connect. Of course, people are connecting. I mean, that's the other thing. We say we're not connecting, but in fact, they're connecting in another way. So, you know, this is a whole change. I don't know what to make of it myself.
And maybe for some people that works, but personally,
Yeah.
when I say multitasking, I really mean, you know, getting the phone call from the principal's office that my son has detention or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
But I don't, I can't handle, I'm not good at that. I'm not,
Well,
I have to
think
stay
making
focused.
a list is a great way to do it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I do. I like to make a list before I go to bed at night. How pathetic is that? And, or at least before I shut my office. You know, I have an office in the home. You probably do too, right? And so I fold a piece of paper in half, and on one side I write open, the other side I write closed. And when I get done working for the day, like when I go home today, I'll probably do this because it's Friday and I'm done. And I'll put it up where it says closed, and then I say to myself, I'm on vacation till tomorrow morning at 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever the time is, right? And so that helps me remind myself that it's time to have downtime. Because for many of us with offices in the home, we could just keep working forever.
Right.
You know,
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't a problem for me because early on I knew I had 4 children, like I said, and I knew they were my priority. And so at a certain point, I stopped. And for many years, I didn't work any weekends. And people always say, oh, if you have a small business, you work, you know, 40-hour days or, you know, whatever. I didn't do that. And I made I always my husband and I always say we purchased a lifestyle. So I made less money during that period, but
Yeah,
it was important
but see, that's
for
a
me.
luxury that's not there today. Since the economic downturn of last year, I understand there are more women in the workplace now for the first time in history. There are more women in the workplace in the United States than men.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that, you know, men tend to make more money than women. I think it's I'm not exactly sure of the ratio, but they tend to make more money than women. So when we've had these layoffs that have been skewed to manufacturing and things like that, a lot of times when those guys get laid off, the benefits come from them. So families are suffering. And so I like to see women in today's world, right, who, you know, there's this whole thing that a few years ago that a lot of these bright young women were saying, I can't have a family and have a big career too. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that it's easy, but nothing's easy. Who said it was supposed to be easy, right? And I like women to get all the education they can get, find a way to make it work, be successful, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, my grandmother was widowed twice by the time she was 34. My husband was disabled 18 years ago. So these things happen in life, and I think it's important for young women to get as much education as they can so that, and get out there and work. And right now we have over 70% of American families are dual income. So that's what it takes, as you well know. But let's talk a little bit about how this economy is affecting small businesses. Now, we're getting ready to go into the holiday season here. This is probably the big season for downtown Princeton, right?
Yes.
Put up those little lights,
Right.
get that little carriage and those horses. Everybody come to Princeton, take a little ride, go walk around, look at the lights, right? And that's the big time. But what's it been like in this last year?
Well, it was hard to predict. I did okay, you know, but I have a good, steady
Right, you do. You've been around
clientele.
quite a while.
But that was not without difficulties.
Right.
I had to work harder to
Right.
get those sales.
Right.
And maybe they weren't, the tickets weren't as high as they were a few
Right.
years ago. But I'm very optimistic. I'm really optimistic because I think that there's a real sense of community. I don't
Yes.
think there's a better place to be in business than into this area.
Well, I think everybody that I know wants to see the borough merchants and the downtown businesses succeed. And you and I had talked that when you were president of the association, you had this program where you were trying to get people to spend $50 twice a week
Well,
in town.
we tried. We instituted a few different programs, and one of them that I was very proud of was the Project Shop Smart, where we donated a certain amount
Yes.
of money to the schools.
That's
We
right.
worked with the schools.
That's right.
I almost think that that project was a little too ahead of its time.
I think so.
Because we were still
Yeah.
competing with, and it was no one's fault, but you know, people don't have time, so
Right.
they were still running to the internet. We
Right.
had hoped that more people would
Right.
do their holiday shopping downtown again. So those are some of the things that
Well,
we're
when you think of
considering.
when you talk about relationships, right? So I understood that program, but that program didn't motivate me a whole lot. I mean, I want the schools to have things, and I probably acted on that a little bit. But what I really want is for my friends that own businesses in downtown Princeton to stay in business. So when you said to me, what, a couple months ago, try to spend $50 twice a week in town, that really meant something to me. It was like, wait a minute, there's something I can do here. This isn't totally out of control.
And I think that's the key. I think that people want exactly.
Yeah.
They want to see their downtown.
They do.
Because they also want to bring their families here. People want to move here. And the reality is, if you do just spend $50 in one store, the odds are I'm going to take that $50 and spend it on my way home.
That's
Whether
right.
I stop at, to pick up some groceries
Right.
or a gift for someone
Right.
on the way home. I'm not looking to go anywhere else.
Right.
But the money stays in the community.
Yeah.
The tax dollars stay in
Yeah.
our state. They stay in the local community.
agree.
And we pay our rent.
Right.
You know?
And so I think this idea that you and I spoke about a little bit, and when you said that to me, it morphed my thinking into, wait a minute, I can make a choice to buy every gift for the holidays in Princeton. What a fun thing. There are all these great stores. I'm down there all the time. Half the time I don't walk through them because I don't need some of the stuff that's there. Some stores I need things, some stores I don't need things. But in the stores where I don't need things, I can buy great gifts.
Right.
And so that's what I've started doing. Every time I buy a wedding gift, a birthday gift, a gift for anybody, I've been buying it downtown.
And I would urge
That's what
people
took me into
to-
your gallery.
Oh, thanks.
My girlfriend turned 70.
Oh, see that? And I would also urge people to compare the prices. There's a little bit of a myth out there that we're so much more, small businesses are more expensive, and it's not true. It's not necessarily true, and I know personally, people are always amazed when they come in and I give them an estimate, and they said, I won't mention any chain names, but they went someplace else
Right.
first, and I was even less expensive in some ways. So I just don't fear coming downtown.
But I think there's another way to look at that too. Everything got a little bit out of control, and more was more as opposed to less being more, right? What's wrong with paying a little bit more if you have to, when you don't have to use gas and you
Right.
don't have to leave town, because those are all hidden expenses, but paying a little bit more and buying one thing you love as opposed to buying 20 things.
And it's not something that you'll see
No, it's not something
everywhere.
you'll see everywhere. I mean, I buy all kinds of funny things. Those women's things. I bought my girlfriend, I had a girlfriend whose mother was visiting, and she was 90, and I found in one of the stores this little flask, a little tiny flask with, the sort of 1930s looking women coming out of the ocean, and it says "Women Gone Wild." I gave that to her mother. She thought it was the funniest gift she'd ever had in her life, and she asked for vodka right away. So, I mean, I'm not going to find that most
Right.
places, right?
Right.
So,
And you have the odds of bumping into your neighbor.
yeah,
You can
exactly.
see,
Right.
I just, but I think that is becoming, people are becoming aware of that.
Can I tell you this funny story? So, I live in an extended family home with my daughter and her husband and their 3 kids. A few weeks ago, my daughter and I decided that when I went down to my office, that the 2 older kids would go with me, and they were going to be turned loose in town all morning just to have fun and socialize and see their friends, and I was going to meet them at the library at noon, so 9 to 12. And they could check in with me anytime. I got 3 calls during that period from my daughter's girlfriends who would call and say, I just saw, you know, your grandchild on the street. Would you like me to run them home? Would you like me? No, they're okay. They're with me, you know. And so finally when I met them at the library, there they were sitting at a table with another one of her friends chatting away.
Nice?
Isn't
Yeah.
it great to live in a town like that?
That is.
I know.
And one thing that I just want to just a plug for this area and my particular location. I can look out my window, and that's why I say it's the best place to do business. And I don't know of another area where the people, the staff that works at the Nassau Inn,
Yes.
the cleaning staff, the maintenance staff will walk to work.
Isn't it?
They
great.
walk past, and many come in and just like to look at the artwork.
And you build these
and
friendships.
they're wonderful. And then at the same
Yeah.
time, I have a neighborhood crowd that lives in the neighborhood
Yeah.
that comes in.
Isn't it
Then
great?
at the same time, I can have, I mean, we saw John Edwards go past, B.B. Newirth comes in quite a
Yes,
bit.
I'll bet.
And, you know, I don't know any other place where you can see that. I see the bread
Yeah.
coming up from Witherspoon Bakery to
Isn't it
Teresa's.
great?
And it's
It's
just
like a real life,
it's
right?
a real life.
That's
And
what I love about
we need
downtown.
to keep it there.
I grew up in the 1950s in rural Ohio, and we had this little downtown. It was an agricultural and there were a lot of factories. My dad was a factory worker. But every Friday night, the ritual was we would go downtown. We would eat at some like the drugstore counter or something like that. We would walk around town. There were 2 department stores. There was a Kresge's 5 and dime. And I have these memories of you would go to Kresge's and I would get 5 cents worth of candy. Or sometimes they would just give me some candy. And mom and dad would be talking to the people and I'd be a little bored. But I mean, you look back on that, and that was wonderful. I think that's one of the reasons I moved to Princeton.
And another funny little thing is that I have people who, with young children, or they're more in the teenage years, where the kids will be able to come in and use the bathroom.
Sure.
It seems like a
That's
silly
great.
thing,
No,
but
it's an important
their
thing.
mothers always they can come in, right? And so if they're running around,
Sure.
they know, because they know the
That's
owners
right.
of the store.
That's right.
They know us.
No, there's a lot to be said. A lot to be said for that. So, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think as we go into the holiday season? Do you have any ideas of what's going on? To
I
sort of
can
bring
tell you,
people?
my concern would be that some won't make it.
Okay.
I'm not sure because,
Right.
and I don't think it's not that they're good business people. I think everyone who's here, we have some really talented, fabulous people,
Right.
merchants in this
Right.
town. I'm concerned with the credit crunch. You know,
Yes.
people.
Can
a lot
you
of people
get credit to make a small business to give
Right.
you to keep you extended?
the cash flow because they may do many may do very well this holiday season, but it's to catch up for
That's
what
right.
we didn't do. So now,
That's
what
right.
happens to the first quarter
Right.
next year? That
Right.
that will be a big thing.
Well, I
we
think
won't be
that we
able to
all,
tell.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that we all have to learn that while we can't control everything that happens in our lives, we can make a choice to have a positive response.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And we can't control everything. I mean, we can be the greatest business person in the world, and we can't control everything.
I always like to say, if you look at life differently, life looks different. I mean,
Yeah,
I make
absolutely.
that up. But if we look at this situation right now, and that may mean that we have to work a little harder,
Right.
get out there and network, give
Right.
back to your community a little bit more.
Right. Well, I'm going to do my part.
Oh,
and I
thank
hope
you.
all over New Jersey, people pour into Princeton because it's a wonderful town, and they go into these great businesses that we have, and they buy some gifts. And they get to meet people like you, and we get to have that wonderful connectedness of living in such a wonderful town that provides so much for so many people. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having
And thank
me.
you guys, and we'll see you
Thanks.
next time. Take care. Bye-bye.